Hello and welcome to Macro Mondays here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is May 19th, 2025, and we're looking at Bitcoin as always to start off this Monday. And actually, we're going to only look at Bitcoin today. My apologies, but there are a few things that I want you to be aware of as Bitcoin is the market leader. We need to focus in on what Bitcoin is doing here, right around the all-time high area. So first things first, here on the daily, there is something to note actually. From here, there is some of the areas that I talked about above. We'll take a look at. Still a nice uptrend. But we have some important things that could occur here on RSI if we do see a high put in here. And this is going to fit in with Friday's analysis as well. We do see that we have weakened RSI in this local zone. So if we don't see a higher high than the all-time high, we're very likely going to see our first in-trend bearish divergence somewhere around this area. If not, you can see here on this particular RSI indicator, there is a little bit of a hopeful kind of price to RSI level readout here. The area above the all-time high is around 110. So we would need to get above the last RSI reading, which would put Bitcoin above the all-time high. And in this case, we can also see the critical zone, which is the 80 read up here, is at right around $114,000. So that is kind of the next big area, 110 to 112 if we start seeing, even lower term time frame closes above the all-time high. Above there, I'm looking around 112 to 115 initially. And we'll take a look at just a moment, but above there, you can kind of take it like 115, 118 or so. And of course, to the downside, we'll talk about that with our areas of support and resistance here on the chart. Give me just one moment to pull that up. All right, so for the bulls, we need to see a high put in somewhere above the all-time high here, and that would avoid the bearish divergence, and it would actually be the all-time high at 109,358. So that is something to be aware of up here. Let's go ahead and throw down a green horizontal ray there. Now, we can see where the Bollinger Band set is. Bitcoin still in the strong half here. Any breakdown below the basis band now, somewhere around on closes, somewhere around 100 to 101. And I would start looking for a retest of the high at 98 to the actual consolidation before the push up here, where we had about 95 to 98, kind of encapsulating this point of control here in the range and the upper 95 to lower $96,000 area. Now, if we do see any closes below the 100,700, that would also be an indication that if it hasn't breached $100,000, that it's very likely going to try at minimum for a swing, but more in earnest towards this 98 to that 95. Anywhere below there, we're looking right back to the weekly higher low, the last closing higher low in this case, even at 93.5. That is where the lower second standard deviation is. You can see the Bitcoin is hovering above the upper first standard deviation. And while playing in this zone of volatility, that gives us a nice picture of where price could go if it can hold this area at around $105,000, we'll call it, as this would adjust ever so slightly intraday. Now, the upper second is right there at the all-time high. And where do we see the upper third? Well, if Bitcoin, by the way, does start to move up in earnest here and get above the upper second, the upper third will stretch out somewhere around that RSI kind of critical zone around the 80 read. And that would be around $114,000, $115,000 by the upper third. But if the upper first is dropped right back in the bucket here at 101 to 104, like I said, I would still give it a chance down to 100K, even on swings, but any closes below 100,700, I'd be looking for that 100K if it hadn't already happened, all the way down to 98 and even possibly that $95,000 region, right? So you can even see here that the lower third is now inside of the bottom side of the range, the original range over here, with that 1.168, where that beautiful, beautiful close open of the first bearish candle post expansion from the prior range came in. And then, of course, a higher low right off of that. And that's the 16.8% above the prior cycle high at $69,000 when taking a bear market log fib pull. Now, Bitcoin is above the 1272 in the macro scale, so that is something to be aware of as well. But just know, if it doesn't break out and it does start to throw highs in, confirmed highs in, which we do not have yet, and can actually avoid because of the swing low yesterday. Like, we can actually get a couple candles inside of the Sunday candle here and still not paint a technical closing high because of Monday's low wick here at 102,105. So just be aware of that. But we will start to see bearish divergences likely form if we do not see a break above the all-time high. So that is something to pay attention to. And let's go ahead and look at momentum here to kind of wrap up the daily view. And that's at 105,360 or so. So, Bitcoin trading at almost 106 here. Looks good in the early going, but we'll see how it starts to act towards the close of day to keep that momentum pointed to the upside in the context of the overbought zone. Now, this is a regular Stoch, not a Stoch RSI. So what does that mean? That does mean that we have, the opportunity to remain in the overbought and oversold zones for extended periods of time. This is not a Stoch RSI that measures the velocity of RSI. This is measuring close over close price momentum. So in this case, looks good. It can even come down as long as it's holding that 101 to 104 range on closes. I'm not even looking for 100K. So, and that is the yellow box here, basically where the basis band is to that 1272. Essentially that key area. Let's go ahead and look at the weekly, and we're actually going to wrap this up. And for Wednesday, I will be doing something a little bit different. We'll take a quick look to check in on Bitcoin, but we're going to focus on some alts that everybody has been requesting. We'll see kind of how that Wednesday video goes, as I have gotten a lot of requests. It's going to be quick, clean chart views where I'm just going to rapid fire through some tokens that you have sent requests for, and see how that goes, see what you all think, all right? But let's go ahead and take a look at the weekly. Weekly, of course, a lot being made of the all-time high on a closing basis here. We're starting to see the bands stretch out because we got a two consistent closes over the upper first standard deviation with a closing all-time high, thus giving us the bias from the weekly that the all-time high to the upper second is the most likely target. Now, I'm saying that, above the all-time high, we have to be very aware of 110, which would be a swing above the current all-time high, right? And then I'm looking around 110 to 112. Just so happens that the upper second standard deviation on the weekly is at 110. Anywhere above 110 to 112, I'm looking around 115. And in this case, 115 to 118 by the weekly upper third standard deviation. Anywhere above there, we're looking 120 to 125. And then we're looking at the more macro fib extension for that 1414 that I have been consistently showing up there, which is a major log fib level, the $128,000, which I've noted if you take a local fib pull on log scale, you're going to get the same exact area. Sorry, it's from the all-time high. You'll get the 1414 lining up. So we do have confluence in that area. It's going to be a major one. Let's go ahead and get rid of those real quick here. We'll keep the actual fibs up here for just a moment. Big thing here is, when you get a close like this, it's really just the swings, and then likely, most would be looking for continuation. And that's where we get that upper second to upper third as the look here. But understand, this is still just the trend break move. At some point, whether it's here or higher, we will get a high put in, and then we look for the statistical, which is the most statistical likelihood, is a higher low or equal low setup, right? Otherwise, this becomes a giant deviation And the higher low setup is where we evaluate trend reversal, and then above wherever this high comes in is your trend reversal confirmation. So that's what we'll be looking out for next whenever this does put in a high. How would it put in a high? And any closes below last week's low at 100,700 would put in a technical high. So that would be what you'd be looking for this week. And we do have decent momentum. Looks fine. And yeah, 84,000's fairly far away for now. And one tip about this. So regular Stoke, usually the biggest moves come in the overbought and oversold zones when it starts to enter with the K read in there. See, like we got it in there. Majority of the move was over to the downside, but you'll see like when we were hitting the overbought zone here, we got a massive appreciation in price once it started to hit that overbought zone and close in there. We didn't really get the K and the D read in there for a regular Stoke on the downside move. And, just kind of rode the lower second down a little bit, front run of the prior range highs, and then boom up for that trend break. So that's what we're going to be looking for this week. By the end of the week, bulls want to see closes over 100,700. To the upside, we're looking 110 to 112, 112 to 115, 115 to 118. Above there, we're looking essentially 120 to 125 before hitting that major overhead level at 128. To the downside on the daily, just to recap, essentially drop the 100,000 basis band area. We're looking to that lower first area at $98,000, to the top side of the consolidation at 95. Anywhere below there, 93.5 at that major weekly, higher low on a close open. And then it's essentially the bottom side of the range here, 89 to 92. And that's going to do it for today. You have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all that being said, Landy out. I'll see you on Wednesday.